presentation. So I want to thank you all for joining today's session on keeping NIST and CMMC compliance manageable. We'll get some perspectives from one of our partners here, Michael Wasserman, who has joined us.
Good afternoon.
Who, of course, is in the DIB as well and faces a lot of the similar issues that a number of you folks may face. Just as we said, some of the housekeeping issues, we will first, of course, be sending you, for those of you who are in attendance, you will get copies of this presentation, as well as copies of the webinar itself or access to the webinar. At the end of the session, you will also have an opportunity to raise your hand if you'd be interested in learning more about Michael's company or in product trial offerings provided by SureShield. So in terms of the agenda today, we'll be briefly going through introductions shortly. We'll talk a little bit about the current CMMC 2.0 requirements, the NIST 800-171 requirements, kind of what you need to know, some updates that have come out more recently in terms of how a lot of this stuff is progressing, what the current requirements are you may have today, and what you should be doing as a company to be preparing for the impending CMMC requirements as well. We'll talk about resources that can assist you with that. We will also show you a little bit about how SureShield solutions can help you. Mike will talk a little bit about how he's been working with some of our technology as a component of this. We'll give a brief presentation and then we'll go on to Q&A. So with that, first of all, I'm Tom Leahy. I'm the SVP of Sales and Business Development with SureShield. We are a technology provider in the areas of compliance, security, and integrity. I've been in the field for about 40 years. And I'm very pleased to have Michael Wasserman, the president of Military Supply Company, join us today. Michael, perhaps you can give us a little bit of your background and insight into your company.
Sure, thanks, Tom. So I haven't been in this industry as long as Tom's been in his, but military supplies resources in our personnel give us about 60 years experience in military procurement. We are basically manufacturers' reps to the military for manufacturers, distributors, dealers, those looking to supply our warfighters with the parts they need to keep the equipment running, basically. We do that by scouring through the day's solicitations every day, matching those to our clients' manufacturing capabilities. And then presenting them with a package for that solicitation so they can make a determination of whether they want to bid on it or not bid on it, basically. But we're doing all that upfront work for them so that it makes their lives easier and allows them to do what they do best, which is make parts. That's pretty much it. We've been doing this, like I said, collectively for about 60 years and continue to find changes in the industry, and what's one of the reasons we ended up partnering with SureShield and Tom's organization to help us with the cybersecurity initiatives from the DoD.
Great, thank you, Michael. And as you mentioned, being in that ecosystem, obviously you and your company need to make sure that you are meeting these compliance requirements, just like all of the others.
That's 100% correct.
Great. So as many of you know, those of you who joined, you're, I'm sure, very familiar that the DoD is moving towards this, what they call the cybersecurity maturity model certification. Really, all the contractors for the Department of Defense and other government agencies, obviously, it's critical that they are, do things to protect this sensitive information. We've had a number of issues of key secrets and information being stolen by hostile governments. They started and still currently have in place what they would call the NIST 800-171 requirements. Those were frameworks for implementing good cyber hygiene policies to help prevent those kind of data loss. And as I said, it's moving now to the CMMC certification process. Many of you may know that the Cyber AB has now been changed. They changed the name of the organization that will be overseeing this. And there were some changes to the initial rule back in November of last year. This is moving along pretty progressively, and they do expect that the new rule will go into effect in May of 2023, very likely. Some of the recent updates, or at least kind of most current updates that have come both from the AB and from the DoD, they are expecting, and we'll talk about this in terms of what levels we'll be looking at. They're expecting that there could be roughly 140, maybe less, thousand suppliers that will qualify in what they call level 1. That is the requirements for what we would call basic cyber hygiene, but a very, very large number of the rest of you, or those that are in this, will be at what they call a level 2. A level 2 is actually exactly as it relates to the requirements and to the controls, the exact same thing as the current NIST 800-171 requirement. And Michael will speak to seeing more solicitations that are requiring you to actually make sure that you've submitted scores to that. There's been a lot because of the Ukraine issues and the likes, that there's been warnings, shields up warnings to tell folks, not just in the DIB, but in general, to keep their eyes out for imminent cyber attacks. And so this has become an even more heightened need to make sure that these practices are in place and will continue to be enforced. And they advise that anybody that's in the DIB, make sure, particularly if you have a network or you have any assets exposed to the internet, to be make sure that you are doing vulnerability assessments. That's basically having a look at your infrastructure and making sure that you don't have any significant vulnerabilities that could make you prone to attacks. So currently, under the current process today, all providers working with the DoD are required to submit and complete a NIST 800-171 assessment. Those scores need to be submitted to the Supplier Performance Risk System, the SPRS, and they also need to be accompanied by a system security plan, as well as a plan of action and milestone report. This is something that's it's telling you, or telling them, what you're going to be doing to implement perhaps controls that you may not have implemented at this point. And Michael, maybe you could speak a little bit to the progress you've made, or some of your insight you've seen in terms of solicitations that are coming out more recently.
Yeah, so more and more as we, again, we're reviewing, thousands of solicitations on a daily basis, our team here at Military Supply, and more we're seeing that requirement, especially with drawing items that require CUI, are being, the requirement is being thrown in there. A year ago, we saw it sporadically, but more and more we're seeing that requirement for a SPRS score. And we're actually getting calls from our clients on occasion saying, hey, I got a call from a buyer and they're wondering where my SPRS score is. So we have to assist them and hurry up. And here's a look at my SPRS score in PIEE. Most of you are familiar with that, I'm sure. So, I mean, you can see here that, by the way, this is a dynamic score or entry. If you look at I'll go through the whole thing here quickly, but if you look at the third column from the right on the bottom, you'll see that our system security plan is V1.3, which is version 1.3. So when we started, we had version 1.1, obviously, and it was loaded in SPRS. And my actual score, which is the third column from the left, which is now 91 because we still as a company have work to do. That score as a 91 has changed several times. I think when we first started, we were actually a negative 14. Last time we updated this was May 26th. And one of the important columns is the fifth one over from the right, which is the date of completion. I've actually changed that date twice as we've updated our SPURS score, because at the beginning we didn't realize exactly how much work there was to get CMMC ready. So we're looking now at the end of November, where we hope that our score is a full 110, which complements the NIST requirement, as well as our completion of our system security plan. And those right now, it doesn't matter what your score is. The buyers want to see, their requirement again is that they see a score in SPURS and they see this information. And that's what they're looking for right now. There's no full requirement yet, I guess until May of 2023 right now is the target for this to be completed and certified if you're at a level 2. But this needs to be in SPURS, whether you're a level 1 or a level 2, to show that you're working on it right now.
Right, and as you said, Michael, it's a continuous process. It's not just a one and done type of activity.
Yeah, we've been working on our time. We've been working on ours for probably 14 months. And
updating and changing, and I'm assuming is that score, and then updating your system security plan as part of that. Mm-hmm. And we will show you this later, but Michael's company, actually Michael gave us a lot of fabulous insight on how to make this. It certainly isn't going to be it's not that there's no work needs to be done, but making it a lot more efficient process to give you all the documentation that you need in order to submit these. And
right, so Tom, if I can for just a second, this kind of a little bit of a pitch for you guys, but one of the things I liked about SureShield is that it gave me a place to consolidate all of these things: my system security plan, all the data on NIST, POAM, et cetera, all those different elements that are going to be reviewed in order for me to get our eventual certification. One of the things that they didn't have, I think, as robust in the platform as they needed was the ability to really have that system security plan present and reviewable in their platform. And that's what we worked on together with their team and my team in order to get that sort of beefed up and built in their platform.
Excellent. And we're going to take just a very brief poll right now. So we'd appreciate if you all could go in and answer, and really trying to find out within the audience that we have here, how many of you have already done an assessment submission at least one time to the SPRS. If you go into you'll see the poll come up, and please just go in and, oops, you know what, I may not have submitted it. Let me just do this again. We're going to relaunch that. Okay, sorry about that. Michael, do you see that now?
I do.
Okay.
Do you want me to answer?
Well, I know you have, and I appreciate the folks in the audience going in and answering. We're going to give it just another minute or two, but actually over 60% of those in the audience right now have not submitted, and then about 34% of them have. So Great. This is, I think it's important to say it's good timing to understand what you're going to need to do if you're going to continue to service new DoD contracts. Great. So let's go on. We'll move on briefly to what this new structure is. As we mentioned before, many of you are probably aware of this, but when they first came out with what they would call the version 1 CMMC model, they broke it into 5 different levels of what they would call cyber maturity hygiene. And a lot of that had to do with the kind of data that you may be working with. Any of you that are deemed to be having access or have, Michael would say, drawings, things that could be considered CUI, you will automatically be at a level 2, which is the current NIST 800-171 requirements.
Yeah, and Tom, if I could make a comment about the drawings, even if you're a manufacturer who is the approved manufacturer, approved supplier on an item, and you've had the drawings for, 20, 25, 30, whatever years you've been making that part, you still fall under the category of CUI. We have a number of our clients that fall into that category, and I was very specific when I was researching CMMC and asking that question of a lot of the experts. So any handling of any drawings that fall into your JCP, for example, if it's a JCP or enhanced JCP drawing where you have controls, it's going to be CUI.
Right.
And which is going to put you at level 2.
And they had indicated in this process, so as folks are familiar, the CMMC process will, depending upon the level of maturity that you are at, require a third-party accreditation or assessment. So there's going to be an independent body that will come in to actually review and certify you. They did initially indicate that within the level 2s, there could be some that would have self-assessments done. So if you're at a level 1, you're going to be submitting a self-assessment every year, much like you're required right now to submit this NIST 800-171 assessment score. Going forward, you're going to need to submit that every year. And of course, things change in your environment, so they're expecting that they will see some changes. If you're at a level 2, then you're going to need to go through this triennial assessment process, and that will be a third party coming in.
Tom, is this a good time to answer a question?
Sure, if you think it's relevant, I would say
it is relevant because people are. David Summers asked the question about, does this apply to COTS? COTS are off-the-shelf items. Mm-hmm. If you're just dealing in that world and you're not dealing with any drawing type items where you're going to have CUI, then you're going to fall into the level 1 category, which is the self-assessment category. You're still going to need to put your score into SPURS and go through the basics of the NIST 800-171, but you're not going to need a certification party. It's more of a compliance position than it is a certification issue.
Excellent. And then I do know that if that COTS product has any kind of additional integration that it has to do into the systems, and then that could be considered non-COTS. And sometimes those things are a little subjective, but
right.
To your point,
but generally COTS is not really.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Exactly. And you'll still be at a level 1 and needing to do that component of that.
You're still going to have to go through the NIST 800-171 scoring and getting that into SPURS.
Exactly. So, as in terms of what hasn't changed and maybe what you should be doing to get ready for this, I think it's safe to say, after going through this second iteration, that CMMC is well on its way to being implemented. The only change to that will be in the process. I think they did do a good job of breaking down and not creating so many different levels. Again, you'll know today, if you're at a level 2, you're at a NIST 800-171, and we'll point out to you some things that we've done to simplify that, meaning you don't have to do it for both. You can do it once and have all the information you need that will take care of you today and into the future. You're going to need to submit that score to the SPRS, and you should probably be conducting and at least reviewing that periodically and updating, as Michael pointed out, your POAM and your SSP. And if you are in that level 1, you're going to be required to be doing this on a yearly basis. So what other things can you do? I think, Michael, again, maybe you can point out, critical to kind of figure out what your maturity level is. I think you've given some good insight into what types of things would be considered that. But really, you should know where that data exists, and you should have processes in place to protect that data, from exposure.
A lot of our clients, and including ourselves, I don't have the expertise in house, right? To have all the IT and all the cybersecurity. So I've made the business decision that because of CMMC and wanting to continue in this world of supporting the warfighter, we have to go outside. So I have a managed service provider for my network. They have actually expertise in cybersecurity, so I'm working with them to get those elements, including multi-factor authentication on entry in the system, managing our drawings in separate servers and what have you, and making sure that all of that is in place. But you also need partners like SureShield, where they don't have, my MSP does not have a place for me to manage all the documentation for CMMC, especially when it comes to getting the certification and having the C3PAO review us. We need that support. So we go out to partners like SureShield and our MSP and others in order to get that. Or if you have the internal staff, the internal IT staff, this is a heck of a project for them. But we've chosen the other route. We've chosen to use our partners and sort of spend our money wisely. So
yes, exactly. And I think that's important to know what resources are available to you. Many of you, like Michael said, probably have an MSP. If you're a smaller organization that's outsourced that, certainly contact them, make sure that they're familiar with what these requirements are. Have them, again, you can use tools that we're going to show you from ours that can help you do maybe an internal assessment first, understand where you may have problems or where you may have gaps, and then help you with that, then can help you make good decisions about what you're going to do or what you may need to do to close those gaps. There is, many of you may be familiar, there's the CMMC AB, and they have their marketplace. They had a little problem when they updated their website with providing good resource access to that, but that seems to have been solved now. So there is a marketplace where you can go, depending on where you're located and the likes, and find companies or organizations that might be able to be additional resources for you. We actually work with a number of those already. So we do have RPOs that work with us and leverage our technology. Sorry, Michael.
Yeah, that's okay. No, all I was going to say was, when you're looking for these resources, if you don't have them, review the different categories of NIST. So when you look at the list of the NIST requirements, they're different categories. Make sure that MSP, you want to do a little bit of homework and make sure that they understand all of those elements. If you're getting data experts, make sure they are data experts. Don't rely on somebody who's there's a lot of people, when things like this happen, jump into the pool, and they don't necessarily have all the arrows in their quiver to help you out. Just make sure that you've done a little bit of your homework so that you can ask those intelligent questions to make sure you're getting the right resources, to make sure that when it comes time for you to be certified, if you need to be there, if you need that certification, that you're ready to go.
Excellent. And we're going to take another brief poll. It kind of may coincide with the last one, but really asking folks in the audience kind of where you're at in this journey, in this process, in terms of being NIST and or preparing for the CMMC compliance requirements. I really appreciate a lot of good interaction with the folks here on the polls.
Great.
So we've got about 30% that have said they haven't even started the process yet. And then the remainder, there's nobody that's obviously complete. There's a few, about 10%, that are almost complete. So that's great.
That's good. That's good. I would put myself in that category. So you can add us to that list.
And I would encourage you, again, those of you that if you haven't started, now is a good time to at least familiarize yourself with the process and what's going to be required, and figure out where you may have gaps in that process. And to that, we're going to just talk a little bit briefly, as Michael said, there are a lot of different components you may need. You may need help from your outside providers. Where we got connected with military supply is providing some solutions, like Michael mentioned, that can help organize a lot of this information that's going to be that's required today and in the future. So we have several tools that are part of our overall software platform. We have a compliance assessment tool. That's what he's using, that it obviously crosswalks to those different controls. It goes beyond just CMMC. So if you have other compliance requirements, those are built into it. We have tools that can actually help identify marked COI data within your environment if you do have that, so you know where it exists and then what you're going to do to protect it. We have continuous, what we call scanning tools. And of course, we generate a lot of the required reports, and we're going to show that to you in a brief demonstration. And we provide those under the auspices of a few different product offerings. ComplyShield is a compliance solution. SecurityShield and Security DLP are the security tools for doing remediation and COI identification. And we also have another tool that actually can help, if any of you are familiar with the 889B requirements, which is that you're not supposed to be working with any Chinese telecommunication companies. We have ways to be able to tell whether you have that in your environment to get rid of it. And while I'm going to the brief platform overview, Michael, I don't know if you have any other comments.
No, I mean, sorry, I got sidetracked. I was looking at some questions.
Okay.
So, but yeah, just that, what we found when we started working with SureShield was exactly what you're seeing here is a place for us to manage the environment.
So we're going to give you just a very brief overview of this solution. And in this particular example, because we're a modular-based company, this customer example has turned on what I would call the compliance requirements, the compliance assessment tools. They're also doing what I would call scanning in their environment. So they're using SureShield's tools to actually scan and identify where they may have risks within their infrastructure. But I'm going to start here on the control area, and you'll see, depending upon the controls that have been activated for you, we provide you what we would call a dashboard. And one thing to point out in terms of what we also provide as part of our compliance controls are policies. So they're templated policies. You need to, of course, look at those if you don't have them in place, or if you have some that you want to replace, you can bring those in, or you can edit and modify these. But we give you a groundwork to get started on policies that relate to all of these controls. I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time in terms of showing you how you would go about doing an assessment, outside of saying that there's a lot of different ways you can filter information. So like Michael was saying, if I were to look at NIST, there's also several different domains that relate to NIST. There's the access controls, the audit and accountability. You can filter all of these things down to just kind of begin to look at information that you want to. Now, as you go through this, or you assign other people to go through this with you, it's as simple as basically clicking on these hyperlinks. And these links take you to what they would call that control itself, the answers to that control in terms of the appropriate answers based upon your review. We also provide a lot of what I would call domain knowledge, or a knowledge base, to help you understand or help your provider understand what the intent of that control is. What are the policies and procedures related to it? What's the best way to the implementation guidance about how to put this into place, what kind of supporting evidence you may need around this as well. And you were going to say something, Michael?
Just where I found a lot of advantage here is in the policies and procedures, because I don't know about you folks, I don't really have anybody except one or two people here to write those. And we were in the language, obviously, as you know, can be somewhat cumbersome. And I like the fact that in the policies and procedures, you give us some template language to get started with.
Yep.
Which has been very helpful for us in writing our policies. We haven't copy and pasted verbatim. I don't think that in most cases is accurate because everybody's system is going to be different, but it's given us a jump start, and saved us a lot of time.
And once you actually get going on an assessment as part of this, there's even ways to look at that from a policy perspective. So I've just clicked on the policy tile, and you can see these are all the policies. They can be, again, segmented by the different type of controls that you're looking at. But once you begin to answer, many of these policies have several different controls that relate to them. So in this example, this access control, we're listing it as non-compliant right now because we have one particular control that currently is not compliant. And this hyperlink would take me to that control. If I were to go into this actually, as Michael mentioned, opens up that templated policy. And you'll notice here, I have the ability then, once I have that, to go in and edit it, specifically to issues around my organization. If I have already created some, I can upload my own into here. And the nice thing that you have within here is that we've mapped these all to the different controls. And outside of course, the work of beginning to go in and do those assessments, a couple of things. One, there are some tools that require you to go through every single answer to get any information out of it. We don't require you to do that. You can begin to go in and answer and begin to come back and see how you are scoring. So we have these areas that are called the compliance reports. Of course, there are general reports on compliance regarding any framework you're working with. It can show you what you've implemented, what you haven't implemented, what you may need to get in place. And as we talked about before, this is where we got a lot of excellent insight from Michael's company on the creation of what they call these DFARS reporting documents. These are the documents that need to be submitted to the SPRS. Those include a report on NIST, the assessment score. So if you noted, he mentioned that his score was at a 91. In this particular demo site, they're at a 62. So we basically are taking the information and understanding the algorithm around the scoring and computing that score. And that score is dynamic. As you update and change that, that will have impact on changing of that score. We output the plan of action and milestone report. And then, as Michael pointed out, there were some inefficiencies initially in our, what I would call our, let me get back out of here, because in our system security plan, not that they were incomplete. I don't know why it's not letting me pop that up. Sorry, Michael, maybe you can speak to it because it's not running for me correctly.
Yeah. So okay. In a dynamic process, it didn't represent our system security plan as well. And the changes, you can walk through the changes then, or the way it is now.
Exactly.
But I got to tell you, they were great. We were on the phone for 35, 45 minutes. We went through our system security plan. Their team went back, and within a week, they said, check it out now. And there was the full draft of our system security plan with network maps and the whole 9 yards. It was really phenomenal.
And there's, in the past, you were required to, because our system doesn't house all of this data, you would take this and put it into a Word document, and you would add that supplemental information. And Michael pointed out that it would be a lot more efficient if I could add that inside the product. So you'll see these top areas like the document revision history, the information system information, the network architecture, the system boundary diagrams. In the past, you had to put those in yourself. Now they're within this tool so that anytime you're making updates to this, it'll automatically update. And then he provided a lot of good information on how to present this when it got down into the actual different controls as well. So now this is a dynamically changing SSP, and when you have it ready, you can output that and do all the items that you are required to submit to the SPRS.
Again, for us at Military Supply Company, it was really being able to be assured that when we put the package together for review for compliance or for certification, mind you, that we had everything together, and that it for me is the simplicity of this platform.
Excellent. And I'm only going to touch briefly on one other solution, and then we'll kind of wind up and get to questions. I won't even go in right now into our vulnerability scanning tool outside of saying it acts like an ethical hacker. So, and it is a requirement of NIST that you do regular vulnerability scans. It will go in and identify within your network or within your IPs where you may have problems. And then it gives guidance on actually how to fix those problems. And similarly, it generates a lot of good, what I would call management reports that can help you see what you may need to do to get you where you need to go. So in this case, I'm going to run a top 20 remediation suggestion plan that if I were to implement these, what impact would that have on my overall risk within my organization? In a lot of different ways you can go about looking at this kind of information, but it's basically telling me that if I were to apply the top 20 recommended remediations, it would be to about 169 hosts. Think of those as IPs, ports, or the likes within, and it would ultimately remediate about 92% of the vulnerabilities that I have. So again, they're really they're powerful, but relatively simple tools to implement. So that's again how we're providing one aspect of support in this process, leveraging technology to help make this easier. And really a lot of our folks that are coming to us now, like Michael said, they're using it as a baseline to get an understanding where they're at and where they may have gaps that they need to close, and then bringing on the appropriate resources in order to do that. So, in summary, we'll wrap up and get to questions with you all here. As you know, as we pointed out, CMMC is coming. There will be new assessment levels. There's new ones that are in place. You need to be doing your 800-171 assessments. And if you haven't started it, now is a really good time to at least begin that process. And as Michael pointed out, look for resources, economical resources that can help you make this more manageable. Is there anything else you want to comment on there, Michael?
No, I think the economical resources, I did a lot of work, not because we try and support our clients in a number of different ways. And we get a lot of questions when new things like CMMC come up. So one of the things I was doing from the beginning, 14, 15, 16 months ago, when this was originally sort of launched as 1.0, I started looking for resources, not just for us, but I was testing those resources for our clients as well. And the pricing and economics of it just seemed daunting to me. And it was really I felt was going to be restrictive for our small to mid-sized manufacturing base, which is mostly who we work with. And I have now, over time, and the evolution to 2.0, I'm finding more people coming up to speed, prices dropping, being more reasonable, and I don't know at what point it's affordable for one company or another, but I find it to be much more affordable for us and most of our clients in having to get certified now than it was, when this whole thing first started. So that's my only additional comment on. But make sure you've got the right resources. That's the important part.
Excellent. And we're going to go ahead and take Q&A now as well, or additional Q&A. And as we mentioned, there would be an opportunity with all of our folks. You do have the opportunity, if you want to utilize this assessment tool, to trial it, meaning you get a chance to test it out first before committing to it. And I think, as Michael said, it's also quite economical, at least from that standpoint. So I'll leave this poll open for those of you who are participating. If you have interest, please do so in the poll, and then indicate what product offerings you may have interest in as well. And with that, why don't we go ahead and take some questions? And there's a question about, were you familiar with ExoStar, Michael?
I'm not familiar with ExoStar, but the question from Dominic was above that was about sharing non-sensitive information. I'm assuming it's referring to drawings and any data, whether it's drawings or AirPods or whatever it might be, whatever that data is regarding the manufacturing of a product or a part is very sensitive going outside of the US or Canada.
Mm-hmm.
JCP certification is a whole nother seminar on its own, a webinar on its own. But that's an area that you really need expertise in, especially in this case where their parent company is in Germany. Exchanging that data in the US is fine. Transferring that data outside of the country could get you in a lot of trouble, and you need someone with more knowledge inside the DoD to help you with that, as a to make those determinations. But as far as securing that data, I think there's a number of IT companies out there that could help you secure in the US that data. So that data, yeah, I mean, that I could answer that question and probably take 15 more minutes, but I think there's more expertise here that Dominic needs to find as a resource in order to get that completed. But I'm not familiar with ExoStar as a software base.
Yeah, I know that it does help with that process. I don't know if it's a continuous tool. There are other offerings out on the market, as we mentioned, certainly. I do see another question. I can answer this. There's one from Ryan. Just if the question is, do we work with MSPs? We do. We have a lot of our customers that are MSPs who are leveraging our tools as part of their practice. Because they're providing services, obviously, just like Michael pointed out, that we're providing tools that help make that more efficient. So if you're interested in learning more how we work with other MSPs, please go ahead and reach out to us and we could show you what that program is like. And you might be better at answering this, Michael. I see one from Riley saying, if you obscure the relationship between the CUI document and the source of the document, is it still CUI?
All I can tell you is the DOE, the DoD, the DLA, if you're ever audited, if they ever see it and you're trying to skirt around it, I mean, I hate to use this phrase, but debarment. With regard to CMMC and CUI data, I mean, if you've gone through the JCP process, you probably are a level 2 in CUI. That to me is a scary cliff to be, tightrope walking on. I think you have to consider it CUI. When in doubt, consider it CUI.
Yeah, exactly. I actually have a question on affordability, just in terms of our product. I think we've found people to find it to be, at least for the CUI, excuse me, for the compliance related solution, to be very reasonably affordable, less than $2,000 a year to use that and to do that in a continuous basis.
Can I also address Jim's question here?
Sure.
So the only thing I would say to Jim is, what we've done is we've siloed our CUI data in our remote, in our MSP. We use a data center to house all of our data, both functional data, working every day, whether it's Microsoft or whatever the platform is. But as far as just managing the data, we've siloed it and we manage it on a continual basis. Just a quick example is, with the Navy, you'll have an opportunity, a solicitation appear, and that solicitation will give you access to the CUI data, the drawings, if you will. But once that has been awarded, that data all goes away. So if you've downloaded it and that data is not available and you weren't awarded that contract, you're responsible for deleting that data. As well as, if you were awarded that contract and you've made the part and you've supplied it, you've shipped it and gotten paid, at that point you're also responsible for eliminating that data as well. So managing your data and managing your CUI is something that we all are. I put us in that same category. We all are going to have to continually look at and get better at as we go through this process.
Excellent. And I did see a question, I think Chandi may have answered, about how easy is it to implement SureShield. I'll speak from my end, and then Michael, you maybe can chime in. It's a web-based product, so it was actually activating and turning on the tool. It really happens almost instantaneously. Getting acclimated how to walk through it is where obviously you need to get yourself up to speed, but I think I'll let you speak for the simplicity and the use of it.
For me, it was, I did the free trial. I'll admit it. I did the free trial, and I was on the phone with Tom and one other individual, and I was trained, during my training, which was only about 35 minutes. I think I did need a refresher, but that's kind of because we started talking about and got sidetracked with the system security plan issue, at which time they brought in additional resources. We talked about that, and then we went through the whole thing again. So I was a little bit different, but I felt the implementation process for me was easy because of the hands-on training and the time you guys took really to help educate me and let me physically use the platform for. I honestly don't remember what the trial time frame was, but I think it was 30 days.
30 days, yes.
Yeah.
You have 30 days to test it out. Let's just see if we can get to all the questions. We still have about 10 more minutes. Do you see Riley's question? Elaborating on them. We've been told from a few vendors that CUI documents may not be labeled, although they should be. If that is the case, do we have to treat every document handed off as CUI?
The documents themselves may not be labeled, but look at the solicitation or the RFQ that's come out. It will often tell you that you're working with either export control or JCP documentation, at which point that drawing goes from a statement A drawing, which is a general drawing that anybody can look at. I could send it to my mother. I could send it to anybody. They don't have to be involved in the military at all. But if it's listed as export control or JCP, you can 99.99% be guaranteed that that's a statement B, C, D, E, F, G. It's going to be CUI. So look at your solicitation if you have a question, or send an email to the buyer. just to confirm if you have a question. The documentation itself may or may not, the drawing itself may or may not be listed as export control. Some is, but not all.
And hopefully they'll get better, because they should be marking documents. If they are considered CUI, they should be sent to you marked.
The reality is, though, I mean, I hate to say this, Tom, but the reality is some of these drawings are from 1968 or 1979. You know, some of these drawings are not, some of these drawings and products or parts that these manufacturers might be looking at are not necessarily current. You know, they're not OEM stuff, right?
Sure.
They're looking at machine shops and distributors to help with these parts for machinery that's been out there for years and years and years. And that's who they look at. That's who the DOB looks at to help support and make those parts so these machines continue to run and operate for our defense.
Great. Well, I don't see any more questions from the audience. Please go in. We got a couple more minutes. If not, Michael, any closing comments from you?
No, it's just that, you know, I think cybersecurity is going to be always in the forefront now. We've definitely gone beyond and entered the digital age. And the more we evolve in technology, the more that the Internet of Things invade our process. You know, my partner is one who would prefer to print out everything in paper. Unfortunately, that's not a reality anymore. We have to work in a digital world, and that's gonna increase regulations and require us to be steadfast in the way that we protect those resources. Because at the end of the day, those resources are owned by the government, by the DoD, and they're very weary, as Tom said, about foreign actors getting their hands on some of this stuff. Yep. So, but there are solutions. SureShield's one of them. We assist our clients and our distributors and manufacturers as much as we can, trying to stay abreast and keep knowledgeable on all of this stuff. So. Excellent.
Well, we want to thank everyone for participating. Michael, thank you for your time with us here today.
And thank you, Tom.
It's, as mentioned, if you are planning on continuing in servicing this and you haven't gotten started, now is a good time to at least start that journey and understand what you're going to need to do. I think it's safe to say that we should expect that rule, the new rule, to be in place next year. And that will bring with it, you know, an even a higher level of oversight, depending on the kind of data that you're managing. But we thank all of you who are supporting our military in whatever form or fashion you're doing that. And we wish you the best. And again, for those of you who did indicate that you would like to start a free trial, you'll be getting reach out from us to get that set up, to schedule time to get your trial set up. For those of you who aren't, or maybe later, we'll stay in regular communication with you. As I mentioned, the presentation as well as the audio of this will be sent to you shortly. And we thank you all for your time and hope everyone has a great weekend. Thanks for being with us for this hour. All the best.